You know that feeling when you're traveling and suddenly all you can think about is a perfect chewy bagel, maybe with some cream cheese, maybe even a little smoked salmon, if you're feeling fancy. It's like out of nowhere your brain decides, yup, I need a bagel right now, and nothing else will do. Well, folks, that's what we are talking about in today's episode. A quick tutorial on bagels, and then where you can find the best of them from all the different corners of the world. So how did a round hunk of chewy bread, a food that somehow went from an obscure snack in 17th century Poland, turn into an everyday American staple? Yeah, bagels started off in Jewish communities in Poland, where they were basically handed out to women giving birth, probably because of their circular shape, symbolizing life or something equally profound. But let's not romanticize it too much. The reason bagels have that distinct chewiness? It's all about boiling the dough before baking, a trick the locals picked up in Poland that gave these dense bread rings their unique texture. A crispy outside, chewy inside. Fast forward a few centuries, and you have Jewish immigrants schlepping their bagel-making skills to America, particularly New York. The Big Apple, with its endless appetite for something new, quickly adopted these boiled wonders, and suddenly bagel unions were a thing. Yes, unions loved them, because apparently these things were important enough to warrant labor organizations. Then came the post-World War II boom, and the bagel wasn't just something you got from the local bakery anymore. Oh no, it was going mainstream, thanks to automation. Mass production meant everyone could get their hands on these doughy circles. And with that came the innovations like slapping sesame seeds, poppy seeds, or even onions and garlic on them. Not stopping there, bagels began to get a bit adventurous. Think cinnamon raisin or blueberry versions. Yeah, purists might cringe, but that didn't stop the bagel from becoming a national obsession. Throw in some flavored cream cheeses and you've got a whole new world of bagel possibilities. From a humble breakfast item, bagels have now evolved into a full-on cultural phenomenon, served up in countless ways from coast to coast. If you're enjoying this bagel talk, make sure to give it a like and hit subscribe so you don't miss out on more. And now we will show you the best bagels from every corner of the world. So Argentina, a place known for its mouth-watering steaks, sweet alfajores, and world-class wines, has a new player in town that's probably the last thing you'd expect: New York-style bagels. Yep, because nothing says Buenos Aires quite like a bagel with a smear, right? This twist in the food scene comes courtesy of Jacob Eichenbaum-Pixar, a New Yorker who decided that what the city really needed wasn't more empanadas or chimichurris, but bagels. And so in 2014, Jacob started peddling his freshly baked goods from a bike, setting up shop outside hip coffee spots where the smell of coffee and baked dough created some kind of magical fusion. People went for it. Locals, expats, whoever was around and curious enough to try this doughy invader. Jacob quickly realized that he was onto something. And by the end of 2018, he'd leveled up from a bike to an actual store, Jacob's Bagels. Now, if you walked in, you'd swear you were in some little corner of Brooklyn. Plain bagels, sesame bagels, the famous everything bagels, all the usual suspects were there. And of course the schmears, because what's a bagel without cream cheese or the fancy lock spread that became an instant hit? But here's where Jacob got clever. He decided to make his own mark with the Mexican bagel, a Frankenstein creation featuring cilantro, roasted tomatoes, and jalapeno cream cheese that somehow worked. A bit of New York, a bit of Latin flair. A mix that drew in everyone from curious locals to bagel-loving tourists, creating this weird but wonderful culinary mashup. And what do you know? Jacob's Bagels became a success story in Buenos Aires. Proof that this city is more than willing to play around with its food scene. It's like they took a bite out of a New York bagel, realized it could be spiced up with local flavors, and ran with it. Now Jacob's is a staple, a cultural bridge built out of dough and cream cheese that proves, once again, that food has no borders. So what started as a small, quirky idea has turned into a full-blown love affair between Buenos Aires and the Big Apple's favorite breakfast. Almost 100 years ago, Eastern European Jews dropped the bagel into Paris like some kind of edible time bomb just as it was making waves in New York. But let's be real, the bagel didn't exactly blow up in France. Instead, it quietly hung around in kosher bakeries, flying completely under the radar of most French folks. It wasn't exactly giving the beloved baguette a run for its money. Then, around 2010, something weird happened. France suddenly got a taste for all things American. Enter the Bagels comeback tour. Now dressed up as a trendy, lighter snack that health-conscious Parisians could get behind, these little dough rings started popping up all over Paris, transitioning from a niche Jewish treat to a mainstream munchie. But there was a catch. The French weren't exactly in love with the bagel's dense, chewy texture. After all, these are people raised on the delicate crunch of a freshly baked baguette, and a boiled dough ball wasn't exactly their idea of bread heaven. So the bagel had to get a makeover. Enter the Bagel, Paris's own spin on the classic. Sure, it kept the iconic round shape and the hole in the middle. Gotta keep some of that bagel essence, right? But the dough? Pure baguette vibes. Fluffy, light, and way more familiar to the French palate. And this was the magic trick that finally made bagels a thing in Paris. Now, if you're craving this French-American hybrid, head over to Ari's Bagels, which has grown to 5 spots across the city. They're serving up this weird but wonderful mix of traditions, proving that you can tweak a recipe just enough to fit it in without totally losing its soul. The evolution of the bagel in Paris isn't just some random food trend, it's a lesson in how food travels, adapts, and eventually carves out its own space in a new culture. When you think of Germany, you probably picture big steins of beer and bratwurst, right? Well, surprise, Berlin's trying to add bagels to the list. Yup, at Fine Bagels, smack dab in the middle of Berlin, you can sink your teeth into a New York-style bagel. Something you definitely don't find on every corner here. The brains behind this operation is Laurel Kratochtvilla, a Boston native who couldn't handle the local bread scene and decided she needed to bring a bit of chewy, doughy New York love to the German capital. Laurel wasn't about to settle for the local bread that, let's face it, doesn't exactly scream bagel. So she started Fine Bagels, and boom, it quickly became a hit with both homesick Americans and curious locals looking for something a little different. Sure, they've got all the usual suspects, plain sesame, everything, but the real star of the show? Their rye bagel with a horseradish schmear. Yeah, you heard that right. It's got that deep, earthy rye flavor with a spicy kick that'll wake you up faster than a double espresso. This combo has made quite the impression, drawing in foodies who want to see what all the fuss is about. A trip to Fine Bagels isn't just about grabbing a snack. It's like a mini vacation to a New York bagel shop, except you're still in Berlin. Each bagel is given the royal treatment, boiled, baked, and served up with that perfect mix of crispy outside and soft, chewy inside. Laurel's commitment to nailing that real New York bagel vibe in Berlin fills a definite gap in the city's food scene and adds a little bit of that East Coast magic to the German bread game. Russia's got a serious love affair with bread, and among all those loaves and rolls, there's the boblik, a round bread that's kind of like Russia's take on the American bagel, but with a little more personality. The name boblik comes from some old Slavic word meaning bubble, which is funny because while these things are supposed to be light and airy, they're also big, dense, and kind of heavy. Go figure. Like New York bagels, bobliki gets the boil and bake treatment, giving them that signature chewiness. But here's where they split paths. Bobliki are usually sweeter, chunkier, and come with an extra large hole in the middle. They're often covered in poppy seeds, giving them that familiar speckled look, but they can also take a savior detour with a sprinkle of cumin, which adds a surprising kick to the usual sweet bite. Now, if you think these are a breakfast staple like bagels are in the US, think again. Bobliki aren't meant to be a morning thing. Nope, in Russia, they're more of a midday snack, the kind you grab when you're in need of a little break. Best enjoyed with a hot cup of tea. Picture this: cold weather, a steaming mug, and a boblik in hand. It's all about that cozy, comforting vibe that feels like wearing flannel pajamas on a chilly day. You can find bobliki pretty much everywhere in Russia, from fancy city bakeries to little shops in small towns. And each place has its own spin on the classic. A bit more sweet here, a tad larger there, a different topping somewhere else. Tasting your way through these variations is like a delicious journey into the heart of Russian food culture. Gerdinan is like the bagel's long-lost cousin from the far reaches of Western China, specifically among the Uyghur Muslims of Xinjiang. Now, Xinjiang isn't your typical Chinese backdrop. It's all rugged landscapes and rich, unique culture. So much so that it even stood in for Afghanistan in the Kite Runner. And just like its scenery, the food here doesn't quite match what most folks think of as Chinese cuisine. We're talking local flavors and cooking techniques that set it apart in a big way. Unlike your usual Western bagel, Gerdinan is baked in a tandoori oven, which gives it a taste and texture that's hard to come by anywhere else. Sure, it's about the same size as a New York bagel, but here's the twist. Instead of a neat hole in the middle, Gerdinan has a thin, doughy membrane holding the circle together, kind of like it couldn't quite commit to being a full-fledged bagel. If you're dying to try Gerdinan, but don't have a trip to Xinjiang on your calendar, you're in luck. Head over to Near Boston Restaurant in Guangzhou, conveniently located near the main mosque. This halal joint is your best bet for getting a taste of Uyghur cuisine without trekking across China. Here you can dive into the flavors of Gerdinan, along with a whole spread of other Uyghur dishes that bring rich, bold tastes and a deep sense of history to the table. That's it for our worldwide bagel journey. From Buenos Aires to Beijing, these versatile treats have made a mark far from their New York roots. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to follow for more food tales. Check out our other episodes for more culinary adventures. See you next time.